Trey Sermon, we were having a big conversation on the sideline going through the depth chart. How many running backs going to make this 49er team? Elijah Mitchell, Jeff Wilson, Ty Davis-Price, Trey Sermon, JaMychal Hasty, Jordan Mason, and you said that our guy Kyle Juszczyk had some praise for Trey Sermon that you heard.
Yeah, I was driving home. He was on with Greg Papa and John Lund. He said that he thought Trey Sermon has had the best 3 or 4 straight practices of his 49er career. And I don't think he's just saying that randomly. I mean, I felt like a teammate trying to prop up a guy who's kind of making some strides. Because let's face it, he said Elijah Mitchell just makes sense in this offense. Like, the guy's a stud. He's a starting running back for the 49ers. Jeff Wilson is clearly just a Shanahan family favorite. Like, that guy is going nowhere. And they drafted Price to run the ball. And he's going to run the ball. And even Juszczyk mentioned, like, goddamn, that guy's physical. Trey Sermon has something to prove. And I think coming into this preseason game and this preseason, I think he's going to get a ton of carries. And I think he can prove that, like, hey, you guys didn't make a mistake in drafting me. I am really talented. Because size-wise, you see him out there. He looks the part. Physically, I've noticed him, I feel like the last couple practices is moving a little quicker. Not that I'm, like, breaking down his plays because they rotate guys in so quickly. And, I don't think he looks as good at, like, Jeff Wilson stands out when he runs. He busts big runs. Price, just because he's running so hard downhill. And when your group, like, ultimately Sermon is this blue chip guy from Oklahoma and Ohio State, yet the knock on him in this offense, which is the only thing they truly care about, is running physically downhill. And all 3 of the guys above him, that's kind of what they hang their hat on. And I think that he can prove to Kyle specifically, and I'd say Anthony Lynn now, who's in the mix, and I'm sure going to have a big voice in the Shanahan running back world, that, like, I think he has to run his ass off in these games
and stay healthy.
And stay healthy. But if you told me over under, if he stays healthy these 3 games, how many carries he gets, I'd put it at like 25-ish for 3 games, total. I think he's going to get his ample opportunities in short yardage situations. And if they get into the red zone, you can never be a guarantee in preseason games. They're going to feed him the rock. And I think they're going to demand if he's going to be a part of this thing moving forward. Because they're at the point now where, let's say he had been shitty, like, he would be cuttable, even though they drafted him in the 3rd round. Do you agree with that?
That they wouldn't chase the loss unless somebody in the building really believed in him, right?
Yeah.
And that would be based on something other than what we've seen on the field to this point.
So to me, he can prove, like, I'm a member of the squad this year, which as of today, I would say he's on the team. But I do think these preseason games for a guy, him, is really, really big. It's really, really big for him to run hard, because that is, you have heard that enough coming out of the building without them specifically saying it, but it's a theme with him that he's just not decisive enough. He's not decisive enough. Well, that's really the only thing they care about in this running scheme, right, is getting downhill. And maybe it came easy to him in college. I liked him in college, but, this is not college anymore. And this is not even like his rookie. I wouldn't even say he's on scholarship anymore, because they just got Hasty that Kyle will keep. He'd have no problem keeping. Like, if Trey Sermon wasn't on this team, it would be clear Hasty would be the 4th running back. He would make the team.
Right.
And to me, the only reason he doesn't make the team is because Trey Sermon proves, like, hey, guys, like, if you need me, we had an injury. Kyle, I could carry it for you 14 times against the Rams, against Arizona. Because ultimately, if I'm keeping you, we're an ankle and a bruised rib away from you toting the rock in the game, right? And that to me is, he can have good practices, but I think he can prove it in the game against other colors, running his ass off downhill against those guys. I think this is, of all the guys, because, like, ultimately you could be like, well, Kinlaw needs, like, most of the guys that we talk about are on the team. And I would say I'd lean this guy's on the team, but I think he needs, preseason matters for him. Just like preseason's going to matter for the couple offensive linemen that are right in front of him, right? The guards and centers. Like, it's a big moment for the physicality of him and those 2 guys blocking for him, whoever that rotating cast of characters is.
Yeah, I mean, it's because they're so deep at that position. They got 6 running backs that, even Jordan Mason, who's been impressive in camp, I think, Now he, ends up in practice squad is what they would, I would imagine, like to do. We know they need a minimum of 4 running backs to get through a season, right? Maybe 5. A couple years ago, it was 5. Minimum of 4.
Well, it's a little unique because the fullback is automatically on the team, right? Like some teams just have running backs; they don't have a fullback. So basically, they keep 5 backs, right?
Right.
Now you could argue Juszczyk's kind of a hybrid tight end too. He's technically a fullback, but he does so much shit. He's kind of an out. You could just say he's in his own little category of a player.
I would. Yep.
I would too.
So, but we know who 3 of them are.
Might have came up to us, said, "What's up today, buddy?"
Promo code ham. To quote Kyle Juszczyk. Ty Davis Price is definitely, you would say, right now ahead of where Trey Sermon was this time last year.
Yeah, I would say the only reason he's not the lock to be the number 2 back is just because Wilson is just entrenched in Shanahan's life. Like he's been here for
pretty
so
quick,
long.
and he's been here.
He looks good.
He's
like
shown
if
that
Wilson
he
had to start a game, I don't even think Kyle would hesitate. Right?
Well, he's shown that he can pinch hit.
Yeah.
I remember he came out of nowhere, scored 3 touchdowns. I put him on my season-long fantasy back when I was a sucker and playing season-long fantasy. And I think he didn't play again the rest of the year. Or he did, but not much, right? So I think he's trusted. I think JaMychal Hasty, Kyle trusts him. Like they're going to lose guys again. They're deep at a lot. Like watching them, it's clear there are guys that they would like to put on practice squad at multiple positions that they will not be able to get on their practice squad because they're pretty deep.
Here's the one thing. Juszczyk mentioned this with Elijah. It's like, I do believe he can be a lot better in the passing game. That's an area which they need to depend on him. The only of the top 3, like Price, until he proves he can catch the ball consistently, like Wilson can. But, the other running backs are just kind of true running backs. Now, they've done that before, right? I remember, Mostert, actually, thinking about it, I felt like he had decent hands. Braid had decent hands. I think ideally,
did you say?
Hasty to me is the best pass catching of him and Wilson, or like you would use in the screen game. You would use running wheel routes.
Doesn't feel like Ty Davis's Price's strength at this point.
No, and honestly, you were using him to run it down people's throats, which is fine, and that's why he got drafted high. I think if Trey Sermon in these games could catch a couple wheel routes and be like, "Hey guys, I can do a couple things." Right? I didn't just go to Lincoln Riley and Ryan Day, just like I can do it. And I truly believe, guy, this preseason for that guy, which is cool. Like if it's going to be like a guard, like whatever, and not that the Niners don't have that, but you get to see a skill guy that's going to get a lot of carries,
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's part of what makes it challenging is that no one's going to make the running back room by default because it's just been a really good position in camp. So there's not like just some spot that someone's going to just get.
Yeah.
That's going to be a strength of this team. And it feels like it's already make it or break it time for him. I don't know if that's how they feel, but how could you just look at the numbers? Like, how could it not be that?
You would say this too, that, if Anthony Lynn's going to be your running back coach, that's a pretty damn good position coach. So if you're Kyle, I do think you would lean with the talent. And I would imagine that Anthony Lynn's going to have somewhat of a voice, like, hey, Kyle, I believe in this. Like he is, people talked about, he's not a Shanahan family member, but he's damn close. He's been entrenched with this family since the mid-90s and Mike. And think about who their last running back coach was, who was basically also a member of the Shanahan family. Like that's like they don't fuck around with who coaches that position, the way they think about that position. Even though they got a million guys playing the position, that's a big deal in the family.